couple of days since we chatted on, of course, YouTube Live. Our last time we were together, I chose to go a different direction and talk about other things. But tonight, I want to return, of course, to the Iran war between, of course, what we see happening with Israel, United States, Iran, and also as well the Gulf states. Now, it's interesting that tonight I did a little bit of research, which I did, of course, a couple of days ago, and I discovered that one of the first things that they were talking about, especially in Lebanon, is that Israel is actually right now using white phosphorus in their bomb dropping, which is really not good because it's actually it has been outlawed by, of course, the international community. But we need to understand that Israel doesn't really concern itself with what the international community is actually thinking. But this is, of course, a stain, as you might say, on the nation of Israel because they are starting to use outlawed weapons. And it is, of course, the people of the Lebanon that are facing that. Now, of course, this is in response to Hezbollah joining into the war and lobbing both drones and rockets into northern Israel. In fact, I saw a particular video tonight talking about Kiryat Shmona. Now, Kiryat Shmona happens to be the largest center in northern Israel, and it has literally been devastated by Hezbollah and its rockets, and also as well the drones and different armament that they've been sending into northern Israel. And of course, they would do that because they are a proxy of Iran, and they get most of their armament, at least up until the war that they had with Israel. And now, of course, these two adversaries are getting ready to clash again because Israel has sent troops into southern Lebanon. And it's interesting that this is expanding so much. I was hearing tonight also as well a official from the United Arab Emirates who have basically said, we will not attack Iran. Even though they're attacking us, we're not going to attack them because we are neighbors. And after the war is over, we've got to once again, develop relationships with, of course, this particular neighbor as well. Now, it's also interesting that Iran has chosen a new leader, and that is the son of the late supreme leader. Now, he was chosen as the new supreme leader. And so, what does that actually mean? Well, what it actually means is more of the same. Now, it's also interesting that this particular leader had his father, his wife, his mother, and other members of his family destroyed in that air attack from, of course, Israel. And now he is the supreme leader. So don't think for a single moment that this particular regime or the revenge that it is bringing is going to stop anytime soon. Basically, what's happened is Iran has said, you may have taken out our leadership, but we're just going to rise up with another leader. And this particular leader is even going to be more hardline, which means more of the same, what it actually means. So where is this war going? Well, the truth of the matter is it's really not going anywhere, simply because of the fact that both sides at this time have, of course, dug in. Now, it's also interesting that I was reading today that Iran has been laying mines in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, of course, that causes a major problem. And I was reading tonight that according to the President of the United States, he says we have destroyed 10 minesweepers in the Strait of Hormuz. So what we have here is we have the Strait of Hormuz, which happens to, of course, be the major waterway that is where all these Gulf states send their send their oil through. Did you know that 1.9 million barrels passes through the Straits of Hormuz every single day? I read that tonight. And so they're not getting through. So what has happened is the International Oil Agency has met together and they say, we are going to tap our unreserved supply. They have to, of course, reserve millions of barrels, billions of barrels of oil. And now they say we have those reserves because number one, we're not getting all this oil in the Gulf states. And secondly, it is, major prices around the world. Because in spite of all the emphasis that people have had on green technology, the reality of the situation is the world still runs on oil. And oil is the number one traded commodity in the world. It's literally what makes the world go round. And so whenever there is a major disruption in the oil industry, prices always jack up. Now, it was interesting that I read that the price of oil spiked a couple of days ago at $120 a barrel. Now, it has come down, but it still means that many places around the world have seen the price of gas go up. In fact, the average price of gas in the United States is anywhere from $3.50 to $4. In some states, believe it or not, the price of oil or the price of gas has gone to $8 a gallon, which is unthinkable in the United States. In Canada, the average oil price or gas price is around $1.50 a liter right now, which works out to a little over $6 a gallon. So it is definitely affecting the world economy. And of course, we've also seen the price of diesel go up substantially as well. Diesel, of course, is more expensive than gasoline because diesel is used, of course, in the trucking industry and is absolutely essential to the transportation industry. That's why it's going up. I was also reading today that several Catholic bishops have actually written to the president saying, we oppose the war. So what's happening, of course, their particular beef with this whole situation is so many innocent people have lost their lives. In the country of Iran, they say that at least 1,300 people have lost their lives. And just today, it has been proven by the CIA that the school that was destroyed in, of course, Iran was actually hit by an American Tomahawk missile. And so even though the White House is saying we didn't do it, the investigation and also as well the evidence says that they do. So this is causing, of course, a major galvanizing of the Iranian People's Reserve against, of course, United States and also Israel because of this particular situation. Now, I thought it was very interesting. As you remember, a year ago in February, President Zelensky came to the United States and was literally embarrassed and also as well berated by J.D. Vance and also President Trump. Now, interesting, I was just reading that Ukraine is actually sending experts to basically train both the Gulf states and United States on how to, of course, protect themselves from the drones. You see, maybe you knew this or not, but the Shahed drones that are manufactured in Iran have been used by the Russians in Ukraine. And so the Ukrainians have developed their own drone technology that is able to defend against, of course, the Shahed drones, which are, of course, coming from Iran. Now, the Shahed drones are actually, drones that are manufactured anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000. They have a motorcycle engine inside of them and they cruise at about 15,000 feet and they travel about 300 miles an hour. And they are a one-way suicide drone. Well, I was watching a video just the other day, yesterday, in fact, of the how that the Ukrainians have designed a drone. It's only about 3 feet long, but it has the ability to, and it carries explosives, and it has the ability to catch up to these Shahed drones, and with certain foot cameras, they're able to, of course, follow the Shahed drone and shoot it down. And so they're now offering that technology and their expertise to the United States. Now, isn't that just really something? Especially how the fact that the United States has been actually treating the Ukrainians, and yet they still want to help. Now, that is real class. I also was reading today that President Macron of France is calling together the G7 leaders, which of course will include my Prime Minister Carney of Canada, and they're going to discuss the war and oil prices and the economic fallout that's basically happening. I don't know who from the United States is going to come to that G7 leadership, most likely Mark Rubio. But the reality of the situation is he's calling this together. He says, we've got to discuss on what we can do about what's going on in the Gulf and with Iran and also the United States. Now, the U.S. Army or Navy, it had been reported by the president that he was going to, escort tankers through the Strait of Hormuz. Today, the U.S. Navy says we can't do that as promised. And so they're not going to do that. And we know that from what I talked about earlier is that, of course, Iran is now mining the Strait of Hormuz, and they're using different types of technology. They're using surface, mid-surface, and deep surface mines, which basically are able to, disrupt and destroy shipping. So, of course, the United States says we can't do that. We will, of course, use our minesweepers to get the mines out of the way, but Iran continues to do that. Also, as well, the U.S. has told Israel to stop bombing oil depots because one of the stories that we had from Sunday night was the fact that Israel had blown up several major oil refineries. And there was an atmospheric disturbance where the rain actually caused, it was a mixture of oil and also water mixed together coming down in the city of Tehran. And so basically, it says, don't do that anymore. Now, it's also interesting that I also read here that the International Oil Agency says they need to release oil reserves and keep the supply up and the prices down. Now, it was also interesting that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said that this is only the beginning of this particular U.S.-Israeli war with Iran, and war that there was going to be more casualties expected. Now, it's interesting that just today, the United States Army and their armed forces say that at least 140 to 150 casualties so far directed from the war. And Iran says that this is interesting. Iran says that they have caught an elite Delta force operating in Iran, and they have taken 173 prisoners of war, which would be substantial because there has not been this many prisoners of war when it comes to the United States since World War II. Now, of course, the U.S. denies it. But according to the Iranian military, yes, we did that because they were operating just outside of Iran and they were caught by the Revolutionary Guard. Of course, United States is denying this, but Iran says we have proof. Now, it's also interesting that 9 healthcare workers were killed in Lebanon with the bombing that's been going on. Also, as well, I already reported about the fact that an oil depot was hit in Tehran and it was raining oil. Now, it's also interesting that today the Russian leadership denied this particular claim, and this particular claim was the fact that that Russia was actually supplying intelligence to, of course, the Iranians when it came to what the United States was doing. Now, Russia says we haven't been doing that, but it was also interesting that Vladimir Putin had said in a broadcast that he did support the new supreme leader. Now, it was also interesting that on the international scene, the country of Australia has given asylum to the Iranian ladies football team. And it was also, this is kind of an interesting little sidebar. Iran is, of course, doubling down and putting a lot of restrictions on Iranian citizens, especially those who were the ones that celebrated the freedom and the loss of the supreme leader. Now they've said that anyone who supports the attacks of the United States and Israel on Iran are going to lose their properties. Now, it was also interesting that the price of oil did spike up to $120 a barrel. It is currently around 105, depending on which market you find yourself. And gas, like I said before, is anywhere from $4 to $8 a gallon. In Canada, it has gone up about 50 cents a gallon, or anywhere from 13 cents to about 30 cents, depending on where you are. That's per liter. Okay. Now, this is an interesting thing. United States has been actually criticizing the United Kingdom. And most experts say that right now, the relationship between United States and the United Kingdom, or Great Britain as is also known, is not very good. In fact, it is at one of the lowest points in recent decades. And the reason, of course, is because United Kingdom or Great Britain said, no, you can't use our bases for long range bombing of Iran. And they've made it very clear that they are not in favor of this war. They've been trying to walk this fine line. And of course, if you remember last week, Spain said, no, you're not going to be able to use our bases to be able to attack Iran. And then, of course, Trump came along and criticized them and then said he had a phone call with the leadership of Spain and said everything's going to be okay. We're going to be able to, use their bases. The next day, the foreign minister of Spain came along and said, no, you didn't talk to us. So it's been interesting that there has been mixed messages coming out of the United States and also as well out of the countries that they say that they have been doing deals with. Well, of course, it was interesting that just a couple of days ago, Iran makes an apology about attacking their neighbors. They said, we are sorry that we are going to, we've been attacking you, but they continued doing their attacks. And so, of course, this is again a mixed message on both sides. Now, it was also interesting that one of the things that Mr. Trump did say, he says, listen, what's happening, of course, is it's short-term pain for long-term gain. Now, this is an interesting little thought as well. Yesterday, Mr. Trump stood in front of the cameras and said to all the people there, listen, we're almost done. This war is almost over. We've reached our objectives. And so this morning, the Secretary of War or Secretary of Defense, depending on which one you believe, he said, Mr. Trump, is absolutely clear. We are getting close to the end, but we're going to stay with this thing until, of course, until we reach our objectives. And then he outlined the objectives, and that was, of course, to reduce the nuclear stockpile, to make sure that Iran didn't have any ballistic missiles or any drones left. And he also talked about the fact that they didn't talk about regime change anymore, but he says we're getting close to our objective. He says we've, basically taken care of the Iranian Navy. So we're getting close. But they also didn't also as well rule out boots on the ground. And there's a lot of people that don't want that. There was a recent poll that was done in United States, done by several different news organizations, and it was discovered that only 1 in 4 Americans actually support the war in Iran. 75% say no, we don't want to have any more to do with it. And in the first 2 days of the war, they spent $6 billion in armament to basically blast, as they said, Iran back to the Stone Age. It has also been confirmed, as I talked about before, that the school was hit by the U.S. Now, the stock market, this is interesting, the stock market has actually plummeted 4,000 points. At the high point, it was over 50,000 points. Now it's down to 46, and there are daily losses happening. It rebounded a little bit today because of the fact that oil is starting to come down a little bit. Now, as I talked about before, of course, American special forces have been caught, and American looks like they want to put boots on the ground if necessary. This is what we know concerning casualties. 1,300 civilians, I'm sorry, 1,100 civilians have been killed, and about 200 security forces, according to, of course, the Iranian Health Agency. 400 people have been killed in, of course, Lebanon. This was interesting. King Charles actually canceled a planned trip to the U.S. because of Trump's remarks concerning Great Britain. And the king said, you know what? I don't think it's a good idea for me to travel to the United States in this, this very charged atmosphere that we live. And so also as well, I was reading today or listening today to a farm expert, somebody who is involved in the fertilizer business. I did not know this. I figured that, that all the essential components for fertilizer, were basically manufactured in North America. My country of Canada actually has the largest potash reserves in the world. We supply, Canada does, 90% of the potash that is needed in fertilizer. But I didn't know that a large amount of other elements that are in fertilizer actually come from the Gulf states and manufactured in the Gulf region. And so because of the fact that all these particular components that are made in and supplied by the Middle East are not coming because of the war in Iran. So if this thing goes much longer, now you have to understand, in certain parts of North America and the world right now, people are getting ready for planting season. The reality of the situation is that in Canada, many of our farmers start their spring planting in April. Well, that's only a month away. And if they can't get the fertilizer that they need or the components that they need to actually make the fertilizer, that is going to cause some major problems, especially economic problems. And we're already seeing the price of fertilizer, I should say, go up. So this is going to be a major problem. And the reason I mention that is because My son happens to be a farmer, and he relies on the fertilizer that he puts, on the ground and in the ground to be able to, of course, um, enhance his crops. And so the reality of the situation is this war is going to affect the food industry as well. And we all know that we all like to have food. So the price of fertilizer is going to go up, and that's going to be, of course, passed on to the farmer, and the farmer is going to pass it on to, of course, us who eat, food that comes from the farm. So the reality of the situation is this particular war is hitting everybody. So this is kind of what I wanted to talk about today. I've kind of laid it all out, the material that I came across, just recently. And it's really interesting, especially when you're listening to the Iranian side, listening to the American side, and listening, of course, to the Israeli side. I did not know this, but in Israel, there is a 5-year prison sentence for, of course, putting videos out in times of war. That means, here in Canada and around the world, if an event happens, what's the first thing we do? We grab our phones, we grab our cameras, and we basically record what's going on. In Israel, if you do that, you could end up with 5 years in jail. Now that is what we would call censorship, but that's what's happening. And so we're not getting the entire picture of what's going on in Israel and the rocket attacks that are happening, of course, to Israel. A lot of Israel is facing some very difficult situations. And of course, Israelis have lost their lives because of what has been going on between Iran, Hezbollah, Israel, and United States. So everybody is losing and everybody is being affected by this. So my prayer is very simply this, that common sense and cooler heads would prevail. It is important to, of course, someone has to blink. Someone has to de-escalate. And we know that that's going to have to be the United States. And the reason I say that is because the simple fact is that it wasn't Iran who started this war. In fact, one of the lies that, of course, has been promoted by the United States is the fact that they've said, listen, they were planning to attack us. They were only a couple weeks away from attacking us. But all intelligence agencies around the world said, no, they're not planning to. So this is a quagmire that, of course, the U.S. is going to have a real tough time getting out of. And unfortunately, and I hate to criticize my particular neighbor to the south, but they have been involved in a lot of wars. And a lot of these wars were started by them, okay? They started the war in Iraq. They were the ones that went into Afghanistan. Now, I'm not saying that, the attack on 9/11 was justified, because it wasn't, okay? And one thing that we know about the Americans is this: if you attack them, they are going to come after you with a hammer, and they're going to, finish the job. Unfortunately, they end up getting into a quagmire. And that's what happened in Afghanistan, for example. In Afghanistan, my country of Canada was in there for 10 years, and we finally pulled out in 2014, but not before we had been fighting for over 10 years. United States, they basically pulled out in 2024 after 20 years of being basically not even more than 20 years in Afghanistan and losing literally thousands of people. And the irony of the situation is the Taliban, the very organization that they were saying that they were going to eliminate, is now running the country. And the irony is that many of the armaments that the Taliban is using is former American armament and also equipment, which is tragic. And so here they've gotten into a war that, you know, uh, and again, the difference between Iran and Afghanistan is this. Afghanistan has, about 30 million people as a population. Iran has almost 100 million. Okay. And Afghanistan is a big country, but Iran is the seventh largest country in the world. And so it is, of course, a real big country with a hard nosed leadership that is not afraid to kill its own people. And you have a leader who wants revenge. He lost his wife, he lost his mother, he lost his father, and he lost members of his family. He's not going to sit there and take that. Now, it's interesting. I was reading that no one has seen him for the last couple of days, but he did release a 12-minute video thanking the leadership of Iran. They're called the Council of Experts or the Assembly of Experts. And there are 88 clerics who basically said this guy needs to be our new supreme leader. And so he did release a 12-minute video that basically said, thank you for selecting me. But this thing is not going to go away very easily. My prayer is that some common sense will be found somewhere and soon. But it doesn't look that way because we do know that the three main leadership in this particular conflict, they are hard-nosed individuals. Trump is a hard-nosed individual. Netanyahu is a hard-nosed individual. And the new supreme leader, Mr. Khamenei, he is a hard-nosed individual. So this doesn't look like it's going to go away too soon. And it means more pain for not only the three countries involved, but the Gulf states and all of us. So let's pray for wisdom and that somebody would have some common sense. Because right now, there doesn't seem to me too much common sense. So that's my thought for tonight. And I hope that you have learned something from what we've been talking about tonight. My name is Robert Dean Steele. Thank you for being with me. Let me just pray for a moment. Lord, I thank you today for what we're sharing. We know that this is a major situation. My prayer is that somebody, whether it is Netanyahu or Trump, that they would step back and say, this is something that we just shouldn't be doing. And I pray that egos would get out of the way and common sense and diplomacy would begin to come. For all of us, Lord, we're watching this thing with a lot of interest. And we know that every single day the narrative is changing. But we know that something will turn out eventually. That's my prayer. My name is Robert Dean Steele. I want to thank you so much for joining me tonight. And again, if you like what you've been hearing and seeing, I encourage you to press the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I want to thank all the people that have joined my YouTube channel in recent days. Thank you so much for doing that. And also as well, check out my videos that I do every single day. I do YouTube shorts every day. And I did 7 of them tonight before I came on for this broadcast, and they are of different types of encouragement. I actually did one on what I call the 7 guidelines of life. Check that one out. I think you're going to quite enjoy that. And so anyway, my name is Robert Dean Steele. Thank you for joining me. Have yourself a great and godly night.